What happens when a celebrity dream's home suddenly becomes a nightmare nobody wants to enter? Some mansions were surrounded by ghost stories. Others were destroyed by flames, swallowed by debt, or linked to painful memories their famous owners could not escape. Before we enter the first mansion, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Number 1. Michael Jackson, Neverland Ranch. At its peak, this sprawling California estate looked less like a private home and more like a fantasy kingdom. Michael Jackson filled Neverland Ranch with amusement rides, a railroad, landscaped gardens, animals, guest houses, and a private theater. It represented the childhood freedom he believed fame had taken away from him. Everything changed after authorities searched the property in 2003 during an investigation. Jackson was later acquitted of all charges in his 2005 trial, but he said Neverland no longer felt like a home. He left California, moved overseas, and never lived at the ranch again. Financial pressure soon added another shadow. A multi-million-dollar loan fell into default, employees were released, attractions disappeared, and the once colorful grounds became strangely quiet. The property was eventually renamed Sycamore Valley Ranch and listed for $100 million. After repeated price reductions, billionaire Ron Burkle purchased it for $22 million in 2020. Number 2. Kanye West, the Malibu Concrete Mansion. Few celebrity real estate stories have collapsed as dramatically as this one. Kanye West purchased the rare Malibu residence, designed by Japanese architect Tadao Ando, for approximately $57 million in 2021. Built almost entirely from concrete, the oceanfront property was considered an architectural masterpiece. Instead of moving into it, West launched a radical reconstruction. The mansion's windows, doors, electrical systems, plumbing, air conditioning equipment, interior finishes, and much of its living space were removed. Plans reportedly involved transforming the home into something resembling a highly secure shelter. Construction eventually stopped. The exposed structure stood beside the Pacific with open spaces where glass walls had once protected it from wind and saltwater. A former project manager later filed a lawsuit involving alleged unpaid wages and unsafe conditions. West listed the unfinished shell for $53 million, then reduced the price to $39 million. It ultimately sold in 2024 for roughly $21 million, less than half the original purchase price. Even after the sale, financing disputes and foreclosure concerns continued haunting the property. Subscribe now, because the next houses prove that even fame and fortune cannot protect a dream home. And share this video with someone who loves Hollywood mysteries. Number 3. Britney Spears and Brittany Murphy, the Rising Glen House. Long before tragedy gave this Hollywood Hills home its dark reputation, Britney Spears reportedly became convinced that something inside it felt wrong. According to claims later repeated by people close to her, an unusual spiritual session was followed by frightening experiences that made the singer leave for a hotel. She allegedly refused to sleep in the house again. The fully furnished property was sold to actress Brittany Murphy in 2003. 6 years later, Murphy collapsed inside the residence and died at 32. Her husband, Simon Monjack, died there 5 months afterward. Authorities attributed both deaths to medical causes, but the closeness of the tragedies transformed the mansion into one of Hollywood's most discussed properties. Murphy's mother eventually placed the house on the market. Later owners replaced the original structure with a dramatically redesigned modern residence, yet the address continued attracting curiosity. When the property returned to the market for $18 million, reports once again connected it with Spears' alleged experiences and Murphy's final years. The paranormal stories remain unverified, but the history is undeniably unsettling. Number 4. Nicolas Cage, the LaLaurie Mansion. Hidden behind an elegant French Quarter exterior is one of the darkest addresses in New Orleans. The LaLaurie Mansion became infamous because of the cruelty associated with 19th-century owner Delphine LaLaurie. Generations of ghost stories later turned it into a landmark for visitors fascinated by disturbing history. Nicolas Cage purchased the mansion for approximately $3,450,000 in 2007. The actor openly acknowledged its frightening reputation, explaining that he wanted to own a property connected to a legendary ghost story. He later said he did not personally witness anything supernatural. The real curse arrived through finances. Cage faced major tax problems after acquiring an enormous collection of houses, castles, cars, artwork, and rare objects. In 2009, the LaLaurie Mansion entered foreclosure, and was sold at auction for roughly $2,300,000. Cage's ownership lasted only about 2 years. Instead of becoming his mysterious New Orleans retreat, the mansion became one of the clearest symbols of his financial collapse. Its earlier history made the loss feel almost too perfectly matched to Hollywood folklore. Number 5. Paris Hilton, the Malibu Beach House. Watching your home disappear is terrible. Watching it happen live on television adds another level of helplessness. During the January 2025 Los Angeles wildfires, Paris Hilton saw news footage showing flames consuming her family's Malibu beach house. The oceanfront residence reportedly cost more than $8 million and had become a place where Hilton, her husband, and their young children created family memories. Although it was not their only property, Hilton explained that the house carried emotional meaning that could not be measured by its market value. Strong winds drove the Palisades fire through neighborhoods along the coast, destroying thousands of structures and forcing mass evacuations. The Hilton family escaped safely, but the mansion was completely lost. Because Malibu homes appear protected by wealth, private gates, and the Pacific Ocean, the destruction shocked viewers. Yet those features offered no defense against wind-driven flames. The glamorous retreat existed one day and became televised ruins the next, leaving Hilton unable to return to the rooms where her children had taken some of their earliest steps. Number 6. Mel Gibson, the Malibu Estate. While flames moved toward Malibu, the owner of this mansion was hundreds of miles away. Mel Gibson was in Austin, Texas, recording a podcast interview when the Palisades fire reached the neighborhood containing his longtime California home. The actor reportedly spent years living on the secluded estate, which was valued at approximately $14,500,000. During the interview, Gibson admitted feeling uneasy because he knew his community was in danger. By the time he returned, almost nothing remained. The mansion, personal possessions, photographs, and decades of collected memories had been reduced to debris. Gibson later joked darkly that the destruction had at least solved some storage problems, but he also described the shock of seeing the property erased. Several nearby houses were destroyed in the same firestorm, showing that the loss was part of a much larger community disaster. Gibson escaped physical harm, yet there was no home waiting when he returned from Texas. The mansion had not been slowly abandoned through bankruptcy or scandal. Nature forced the decision in a single terrifying afternoon. Number 7. Anthony Hopkins, the Pacific Palisades home. History seemed to repeat itself with unusual cruelty at this property. Anthony Hopkins had already experienced devastating California wildfires before the January 2025 disaster. His earlier Malibu home was destroyed in the 2000 fire season, while another residence narrowly survived the Woolsey fire in 2018. Then the Palisades fire reached his latest house. Images from the area showed the Oscar-winning actor's residence reduced to burned foundations and scattered remains. Hopkins was safe, but another carefully built home had vanished. Instead of focusing publicly on furniture or money, he shared a reflective message about life, loss, and the temporary nature of possessions. His response carried extra weight, because this was not his first experience of seeing a home threatened or destroyed. For most people, surviving one major house fire would define a lifetime. Hopkins faced the same nightmare repeatedly. The mansion's destruction also demonstrated why even extremely valuable Pacific Palisades properties could not be considered permanent. Fame allowed him to rebuild, but it could not make a building immune to California's increasingly dangerous fire conditions. Number 8. Brad Pitt, the haunted Los Feliz compound. A warning about ghosts would send many buyers running. Brad Pitt reportedly found it attractive. In 1994, he purchased a craftsman-style Los Feliz house from Cassandra Peterson, better known as Elvira. Peterson said she told Pitt about figures, unexplained movements, and other strange events she believed she had witnessed there. Rather than abandoning the deal, Pitt expanded the property. Over nearly 3 decades, he purchased surrounding homes and created a private compound filled with trees, pools, workshops, and unusual architectural details. The original house remained at its center. Paranormal stories followed the estate, although Pitt never publicly claimed that spirits forced him out. His departure came during a major personal transition, years after the end of his marriage to Angelina Jolie. In 2023, the compound sold for approximately $39 million. The closing ended one of Hollywood's longest celebrity relationships, with a supposedly haunted address. Pitt had survived the reported ghosts, renovations, changing neighbors, security concerns, and family upheaval. Yet eventually, even this carefully assembled sanctuary became a place he was ready to leave behind. Number 9. Adele. Lock House. Deep in the English countryside, this grand mansion should have offered Adele complete privacy after the enormous success of her album 21. Instead, Lock House became famous for making the singer uncomfortable. Built in the early 20th century, the residence included long corridors, large rooms, a private chapel converted into a kitchen, extensive grounds, and the atmosphere of an isolated country hotel. During a televised tour, Adele described one part of the building as frightening. Reports later claimed that unexplained sounds made her nervous enough to employ additional overnight security. Her tenancy lasted only around 6 months. She moved away and did not renew the agreement. Years later, the owner claimed Adele's public comments had damaged the mansion's reputation and discouraged potential buyers. One proposed purchaser reportedly withdrew after learning about the haunting stories. The owner eventually sought permission to divide the property into several smaller homes. Adele had escaped the mansion quickly, but the building could not escape her description of it. A few nervous words from one of the world's most famous singers became more powerful than years of expensive renovations. Number 10. Billy Crystal. The home of 46 years. Some mansions represent luxury. This one represented nearly an entire adult life. Billy Crystal and his wife, Janice, moved into their Pacific Palisades home in 1979. Before many of his most famous films, television appearances, and Academy Awards ceremonies. The couple raised their children there. Their grandchildren visited the same rooms. Every corner collected memories across 46 years, making the property something far more meaningful than an expensive celebrity address. In January 2025, the Palisades fire swept through the neighborhood. Crystal and his wife evacuated, but the house was destroyed. Their statement focused not only on their own loss but also on neighbors, local businesses, firefighters, and families facing the same disaster. Money could potentially rebuild walls, yet no construction project could recreate the original home where several generations had grown together. The fire forced Crystal to abandon a place he had chosen to keep through decades of Hollywood success. Among all the properties on this list, few carried such a long and uninterrupted family history before disappearing overnight. Number 11. Cara Delevingne, the Mansion of Secret Rooms. Nothing about this Studio City property was ordinary. Cara Delevingne transformed the residence into a deeply personal playground filled with hidden spaces, unusual passageways, themed rooms, designer objects, art, and imaginative features that reflected her eccentric personality. That individuality made its destruction especially painful. In March 2024, a major fire broke out while Delevingne was in London. More than 90 firefighters reportedly battled the flames for over 2 hours. One firefighter was injured, and another person inside the property suffered smoke inhalation. The blaze became so intense that part of the roof collapsed. Early confusion also led Delevingne to fear that her cats had died inside, although they were later confirmed safe. Images showed flames shooting through the structure as firefighters surrounded the property. This was not a generic investment mansion that could be replaced with a similar building. Rooms had been designed around Delevingn's memories, humor, collections, and creative interests. The fire removed the sense of security that the private estate was meant to provide. Investigators examined the cause, while the actress publicly mourned the home and thanked emergency crews. The mansion's secret doors and playful hiding places could surprise visitors, but none offered protection when flames moved through the roof and interior. What had been a celebration of Delevigne's imagination became an empty, heavily damaged structure almost overnight. Number 12. Adam Brody and Leighton Meester, the Palisades Retreat. From the outside, their Pacific Palisades residence represented a quiet version of Hollywood success. Adam Brody and Leighton Meester had built careers on 2 of television's most recognizable youth dramas, but their real life remained relatively private. The mansion offered room for their children away from constant public attention. That privacy ended when photographs of the house surrounded by flames spread across the internet during the January 2025 fires. The couple escaped safely, yet the structure was destroyed. Reports described the residence as a modern family home, purchased several years earlier. It included large windows, landscaped outdoor areas, and the polished design expected in one of Los Angeles's most expensive neighborhoods. None of those features mattered when strong winds pushed burning material through the community. The loss attracted attention because Brody and Meester were appearing at public events shortly before the disaster, seemingly entering another successful period in their careers. Days later, their home no longer existed. Their experience also revealed how quickly private grief becomes public when celebrities are involved. Before the family could fully process what had happened, aerial photographs and property values were being shared worldwide. The couple had been forced away from their sanctuary, while strangers examined the ruins as entertainment news. Number 13. Jeff Bridges, the family's Malibu legacy. Long before Jeff Bridges became an Oscar-winning actor, this Malibu home belonged to his parents. Lloyd and Dorothy Bridges acquired the oceanfront residence during the 1950s, when Malibu was far less developed, and Hollywood families could still establish relatively simple retreats beside the water. The property later passed to Jeff, his brother Beau, and their sister Cindy. It was not merely another mansion in an actor's portfolio. It connected several generations of one of Hollywood's best-known families. That history ended during the Palisades fire. The residence was destroyed as flames traveled along the coast, consuming buildings that had survived decades of storms, earthquakes, changing architectural trends, and rising property values. Oceanfront homes often appear protected because there is little vegetation directly in front of them. However, wind can carry burning material across roads, roofs, and entire blocks. Once neighboring structures ignite, even houses near the beach become vulnerable. For the Bridges family, rebuilding would not restore the original place chosen by their parents. The view might remain, and a new structure could eventually rise, but the physical connection to childhood gatherings and old Hollywood life was gone. That is what made this abandonment different from an ordinary real estate transaction. Nobody decided the market was favorable, or that it was time for a change. A family legacy that began in the 1950s was ended by a fire moving faster than residents could defend against it. Number 14. Eugene Levy, the honorary mayor's home. Few celebrities were as closely connected to Pacific Palisades as Eugene Levy. The actor had lived in the community long enough to become known jokingly as its honorary mayor. He was not simply a famous resident passing through a luxury neighborhood. He was part of its identity. As the Palisades fire expanded, Levy attempted to evacuate through roads crowded with cars and frightened residents. He described smoke over Temescal Canyon as unusually dark and intense. Traffic became so difficult that many people abandoned vehicles and continued on foot. Levy escaped, but his house did not. Photographs later confirmed that the residence had been destroyed. The loss came as shops, schools, churches, restaurants, and neighboring homes were also disappearing. That larger devastation gave the word abandoned a different meaning. Levy was not leaving one mansion for another, or walking away from an unwanted investment. The entire familiar environment surrounding the house had changed. Returning would mean entering a landscape where streets remained but landmarks had vanished. For decades, the neighborhood offered Levy normality beyond film sets and red carpets. After the fire, the honorary mayor had no home to return to and no community center left untouched. His story became one of the clearest examples of how the disaster erased not just celebrity properties, but the shared structure of an established neighborhood. Number 15. John Goodman, the house that survived fame but not fire. Success had allowed John Goodman to build a peaceful life far from the chaotic characters he often portrayed. His Pacific Palisades residence stood in a neighborhood known for privacy, canyon views, ocean air, and easy access to the entertainment industry. During the January 2025 wildfire, photographs showed the actor's property reduced to debris. Parts of the swimming pool area remained recognizable, but the main structure had disappeared. Goodman did not immediately provide a lengthy public account, leaving images to tell most of the story. The contrast was severe. One photograph showed a complete family home, while the next showed scorched ground and twisted material. A mansion of that size contains more than expensive objects. It becomes a private archive filled with scripts, photographs, awards, clothing, books, artwork, gifts, and items that never appear in public. Evacuation orders often give residents only enough time to collect identification, pets, medicine, and a few important belongings. For Goodman, abandoning the property was not a carefully planned move. It was an emergency decision made while a fast-moving fire threatened the entire area. The home had survived changing careers, personal challenges, storms, and decades of life in Southern California. Yet one extreme weather event, transformed it into an address without a house, proving again that Hollywood permanence can disappear in a single night. Number 16. Mandy Moore, the Altadena Dream Home. A renovation project had turned this mid-century Altadena property into one of Mandy Moore's most personal achievements. She and her husband, musician Taylor Goldsmith, carefully updated the house while preserving its architectural character. Design publications later featured the finished residence, making it familiar to fans. When the Eaton fire entered Altadena, the family evacuated with their children and pets. Moore initially believed the entire house had been lost. Later inspection revealed that the main structure was still standing, but large sections of the property, including a garage, back house, and Goldsmith's music studio, had been destroyed. Smoke, ash, fire damage, and unsafe conditions made the residence unlivable. Musical instruments and professional equipment disappeared with the studio. Nearby homes belonging to relatives were also lost, multiplying the emotional impact. The surviving exterior created a painful illusion. From certain angles, the dream house appeared intact. Inside and around it, the reality was far more serious. A standing building is not necessarily a safe home, especially after fire has damaged utilities, air quality, roofing, landscaping, and neighboring structures. Moore faced criticism after sharing fundraising information for relatives, illustrating how public figures can be judged, even while responding to disaster. Behind that debate was a family displaced from a house they had spent years designing. The mansion survived just enough to remain recognizable, but not enough for them to continue living there. Number 17. Miles Teller, the newly purchased mansion. Only months separated the excitement of acquiring this Pacific Palisades home from the nightmare of losing it. Miles Teller and his wife Keely had purchased the modern residence for several $1 million, beginning what should have been a new chapter in one of Los Angeles's most desirable communities. The Palisades fire erased that plan. Photographs showed the property engulfed and later reduced to ruins. The couple escaped, but the mansion and many possessions inside were gone. One small detail became especially heartbreaking. Keely later encouraged people facing evacuation to take their wedding dresses with them. Her own dress had reportedly remained inside the house, along with other personal objects that seemed safe until the final moments. That message captured a difficult truth about emergency evacuation. People often believe they will return within hours. They collect practical items, but leave sentimental belongings, because packing an entire life feels impossible, and because taking too much can delay escape. The mansion's modern materials, expensive finishes, and carefully designed outdoor spaces offered no guarantee of survival. The property was valuable because of its location, yet that same location placed it directly within a dangerous fire zone. For Teller, the house was not an aging estate already filled with decades of memories. It was a future home taken away before the couple had time to build those memories. Sometimes a mansion becomes cursed not by its past, but by the future that never happens inside it. Number 18. Anna Faris, the Pacific Palisades residence. A wall of smoke and fire gave Anna Faris and her family little choice but to leave their Pacific Palisades home behind. Confirmation soon arrived that the residence had been completely destroyed. The actress had owned the property for several years, using it as a private base while raising her son and continuing her film and television career. Unlike the exaggerated mansions often associated with celebrity culture, the home was repeatedly described as a family residence within a close community. Pictures taken after the fire showed little remaining beyond parts of the foundation and outdoor features. The speed of destruction meant there was no opportunity to arrange professional movers, store furniture, or protect collections. Everything left inside became dependent on whether the building survived. Faris and her relatives were unharmed, a fact emphasized in early reports. Yet physical safety does not remove the emotional shock of realizing that familiar rooms, ordinary household objects, and years of family history are suddenly inaccessible. The property also demonstrated why the word abandoned can be misleading after a disaster. Faris did not reject the house. She followed evacuation orders and expected the possibility of returning. The fire made the final decision for her. Number 19. Ricky Lake, the place she planned to grow old. Years of searching ended when Ricky Lake found a Malibu property that felt like her personal heaven. The house overlooked the ocean and became the location where she married Ross Birmingham. She repeatedly described it as their dream home and the place where they intended to grow old. That emotional attachment made the Palisades fire especially cruel. Friends attempted to protect the property as flames approached, but the effort could not save it. Lake later announced that everything was gone. Her public message focused on grief rather than financial value. This was where she had celebrated love, after experiencing major personal changes and loss. It symbolized stability, renewal, and a future that finally seemed peaceful. The mansion's destruction also revealed the limits of individual defense. Residents can clear vegetation, prepare hoses, install fire-resistant materials, and remain alert, but extreme winds can overwhelm almost every precaution. Staying too long can also place homeowners and emergency workers in greater danger. Lake and her husband left because their lives mattered more than the building. Even so, accepting that truth did not make the loss simple. A place chosen for the final chapters of life had disappeared before those chapters could be written. Number 20. Heidi Montag and Spencer Pratt. The televised loss. Reality television had documented much of Heidi Montag and Spencer Pratt's relationship, but nothing prepared viewers for the real images of their home burning. As the Palisades fire moved through the neighborhood, Pratt posted footage from a distance showing flames near the property. The couple evacuated with their children. Soon afterward, they confirmed that the house had been destroyed. Pratt's parents also lost their nearby residence, turning one family's disaster into a multi-generational loss. Montag recorded emotional videos about leaving ordinary possessions behind. She spoke about longing to return home even though she knew the building was gone. Pratt later photographed the remains and admitted that telling himself possessions did not define his existence was easier than fully believing it. The story gained unusual public momentum. Supporters began streaming Montag's older music, pushing her album upward on digital charts as a form of financial and emotional assistance. Critics questioned the attention given to wealthy celebrities, while fans argued that grief remains real regardless of fame. Behind the online arguments was a simple image: parents escaping with young children, while the house containing their daily life disappeared. Number 21. Joshua Jackson. The childhood home he bought back. Most celebrity property purchases are about status, investment, or privacy. Joshua Jackson's Pacific Palisades house carried a more personal purpose. He had lived there as a child, and as an adult he reportedly purchased the property so his own daughter could experience the same sense of home. That full-circle story ended with the January 2025 fire. Jackson evacuated safely with his family, but the residence was destroyed. The loss was unusually layered. He was not only saying goodbye to his current home, he was losing the physical setting of his own childhood. Rooms that connected different stages of his life disappeared at the same time. Jackson later expressed gratitude that his daughter, relatives, and neighbors had survived. His response avoided pretending the building mattered more than human life, yet he acknowledged the deep emotional significance of the place. Buying back a childhood property is something few people can achieve. It suggests a desire to preserve memory by controlling the landscape where it happened. The fire proved that ownership cannot guarantee preservation. Number 22. Kobe Smulders and Taryn Killam. The family home. Privacy had always been important to Kobe Smulders and Taryn Killam. Although both were successful television performers, they kept much of their family life away from public attention. Their California residence provided a private environment for raising their children. That separation between public and private life collapsed when photographs confirmed that the home had been destroyed in the Los Angeles fires. The couple did not immediately release extensive statements, but images of the property circulated widely. The ruins showed the remains of a residence that had once included warm wooden details, outdoor living areas, mature landscaping, and the comfortable scale of an established family home. Fire stripped away almost every recognizable feature. Celebrity coverage often focuses on estimated property prices, but replacement cost is only one part of such a loss. Families also lose school records, handmade gifts, children's artwork, clothing, photographs, furniture collected gradually, and ordinary objects connected to important moments. Smulders and Killam were able to leave safely, but evacuation meant surrendering control. They had to wait for official information, while flames determined what would remain. The house had not been placed on the market or prepared for a move. There were no labeled boxes or final walks through each room. The family simply closed the door without knowing it would be the last time. That uncertainty is one of the most haunting parts of every forced evacuation. Number 23. Cameron Matheson. The Street of Empty Foundations. News footage offered Cameron Matheson a terrifying clue about what was happening to his neighborhood. Reports showed houses burning near his Pacific Palisades block, but camera angles made it impossible to determine whether his own property was still standing. Unable to tolerate the uncertainty, Matheson drove toward the area during the early morning. Smoke, darkness, emergency activity, and burning structures surrounded the route. When he reached the street, he found that his home had disappeared. Video shared afterward showed rows of damaged properties and empty foundations. Matheson identified the final ruined lot as the place where his family's house had stood. The actor emphasized that his relatives were safe, yet he struggled to describe the scene as real. A home is normally the reference point used to understand a neighborhood. Once it vanishes, even a familiar street can appear completely foreign. Matheson had recently completed major work on the property, adding another layer of frustration. Time, money, planning, and emotional energy had been invested in making the house suitable for the family's next stage. The footage became widely viewed because it transformed a large disaster into one person's journey toward confirmation. Viewers watched him approach the location, knowing that hope was becoming less realistic with every destroyed house he passed. By the time he reached the property, abandonment was no longer a possibility. It was the only reality left. Number 24. Cary Elwes. The home he could not save. A heroic character may fight through impossible danger on screen, but real wildfire leaves little room for dramatic rescue. Cary Elwes and his family evacuated as the Palisades fire threatened their home. They survived, but the house was destroyed. The actor's message began with gratitude. He confirmed that his relatives were safe and thanked firefighters, law enforcement officers, and emergency workers who continued operating under dangerous conditions. Only after that did he acknowledge the loss of the residents. His response reflected the difficult emotional balance experienced by many fire survivors. They feel relief because nobody died, guilt because others suffered greater losses, and grief because their own home is gone. All three reactions can exist at the same time. Elwes's property was one of many celebrity houses covered by international media, but he repeatedly directed attention toward the broader community. Thousands of residents were facing the same displacement without the financial resources or public support available to a well-known actor. Even for someone associated with adventure films, there was no meaningful way to defend a mansion against flames driven by extreme wind. Remaining behind would have endangered both the family and firefighters. The building could someday be replaced, but the original home was beyond rescue. Elwes' experience turned the familiar Hollywood idea of a courageous last stand upside down. In this situation, the responsible and genuinely brave choice was leaving everything behind before the road out became impossible to use. Number 25. Brian Greenberg and Jamie Chung, The Forever Home. Those two words, forever home, made this loss especially painful. Brian Greenberg and Jamie Chung believed they had found the property where their family could settle permanently. The residence represented stability after years of acting jobs, travel, temporary housing, and changing production schedules. The Palisades fire destroyed that plan. Greenberg later filmed himself walking through what remained: burned foundations, twisted objects, damaged trees, and scattered fragments replaced the complete house shown in earlier family images. The couple shared the phrase, "Nothing lasts forever," while confirming that they and their children were safe. It was a simple statement, but it captured the emotional reversal. A home selected because it seemed permanent had demonstrated how temporary physical security can be. Walking through ruins can be more difficult than seeing destruction from a distance. Individual objects become recognizable, part of an appliance, a piece of furniture hardware, a child's item, or a section of flooring. Each fragment brings back the room that once surrounded it. For Greenberg and Chung, the disaster also interrupted routines their young family had only recently established. Rebuilding required more than construction. It meant finding temporary housing, replacing documents, handling insurance, protecting children from stress, and deciding whether returning to the same fire-prone location felt possible. Number 26. Yolanda Hadid, Bella Hadid's childhood mansion. For Bella Hadid, the images were painfully specific. She shared a photograph showing flames coming through the Malibu home where she had spent part of her childhood. One caption identified the location of her former bedroom. The coastal residence had belonged to her mother, Yolanda Hadid, and was familiar to viewers through the family's public life and television appearances. It represented the period before Bella and Gigi Hadid became internationally known models. Although Yolanda no longer used the property as her primary residence, Its destruction erased a physical link to the family's earlier years. Childhood homes hold emotional power even after families move away. People remember where furniture stood, how sunlight entered a bedroom, and which doorway was used for family photographs. Seeing those spaces burn from a distance creates a strange form of grief. The property is part of the past, yet its existence provides reassurance that the past still has a location. Once destroyed, memory loses that physical anchor. The fire also demonstrated how celebrity houses often pass through several identities. One owner sees an investment, another sees an architectural project, while a child remembers only home. Public reports focused on the mansion's value and famous connections. Bella's brief caption reduced the story to something simpler. The room where she once slept was now inside a wall of fire. Number 27. Diane Warren. The house where songs were written. For almost 30 years, this Malibu beach house gave Diane Warren a place to work, think, and look across the ocean. The songwriter behind major hits for countless performers associated the property with creative breakthroughs and private memories. When the Palisades fire reached the coast, the house was lost. Warren shared one of the final photographs she had taken from the property, showing a familiar rock near the water and a rainbow above the area. Her message mentioned the songs written there over the decades. That detail made the residence more than a celebrity retreat. It was effectively a creative studio where melodies and lyrics connected to films, singers, awards, weddings, and listeners around the world had developed. Warren also expressed relief that animals at her rescue ranch were safe. Like many survivors, she immediately placed living creatures above buildings while still acknowledging the emotional weight of the destruction. Studios are often imagined as professional rooms filled with recording equipment, but creative work can become tied to a particular view, chair, window, or daily ritual. Recreating the same technical setup elsewhere does not guarantee the same feeling. The mansion's loss, therefore, affected both Warren's personal history and her working environment. She could continue writing, but never again from the rooms that had silently witnessed decades of songs. The address remained on the coast, yet the private creative world built around it had been permanently abandoned. Number 28. Bozoma St. John, the home she prayed for. Years of ambition and work stood behind this Malibu purchase. Business executive and television personality Bozoma St. John described the house as the property she had prayed for and struggled to obtain. It became a sanctuary shared with her daughter. St. John installed a keypad at the entrance because she wanted relatives and friends to visit freely. The mansion was intended to represent openness, security, and community, rather than isolation behind celebrity gates. The Los Angeles fires destroyed it completely. In her public response, St. John wrote about the labor and hope invested in acquiring the home. She also discussed the emotional importance of creating a safe environment after difficult experiences within the neighborhood. That context made the loss feel deeply unfair. The house was not inherited or purchased casually. It symbolized reaching a goal after professional achievement, personal grief, and the responsibility of raising a daughter. Fire left no opportunity to preserve that symbol. The structure, belongings, family gathering spaces, and carefully created sense of protection disappeared together. St. John's story challenges the idea that wealthy homeowners can simply buy another mansion and continue unchanged. A replacement property might have similar square footage, better materials, or a more expensive view, but it would not be the house she had specifically imagined and worked toward. Number 29. Courtney Cox, the Laurel Canyon Ghost House. Skepticism protected Courtney Cox from the mansion's reputation, at least in the beginning. The Laurel Canyon property had previously belonged to singer Carole King, who reportedly warned Cox about unusual activity inside the house. Cox did not immediately believe the story. Old Hollywood neighborhoods naturally produce strange noises, moving shadows, electrical problems, and exaggerated legends. For a while, the actress continued living there despite what she had been told. Her attitude changed after a delivery worker arrived at the door. According to Cox, the man asked whether she knew the house was haunted and claimed he could see someone standing behind her. That moment made the earlier warnings feel suddenly personal. Cox later said she could no longer sleep there alone. She eventually sold the property, leaving behind both the canyon views and the unanswered question of what the delivery worker believed he had seen. There is no scientific evidence that a supernatural figure occupied the mansion. The experience could have involved mistaken perception, suggestion, or a carefully timed joke. Yet fear does not need proof to change how a person feels inside a home. Once Cox stopped feeling safe, the house could no longer perform its most basic function. The mansion remained valuable, stylish, and structurally complete, but its famous owner was emotionally finished with it. Sometimes abandonment begins not with physical destruction, but with one sentence at the front door. Number 30. 50 Cent. The 52-room Farmington Mansion. Bigger did not automatically mean better at this enormous Connecticut estate. Originally associated with boxer Mike Tyson, the mansion covered approximately 50,000 square feet and included dozens of rooms, multiple kitchens, a nightclub, a recording studio, a theater, a casino-style space, and extensive recreational facilities. 50 Cent purchased it in 2003, during the explosive early period of his music career. The property became one of the most memorable locations featured on celebrity lifestyle television. Maintaining it was another story. Heating, cooling, cleaning, repairing, insuring, staffing, and securing a house of that size created extraordinary annual expenses. The rapper eventually placed it on the market, beginning a long struggle to find a buyer. Initial asking prices reached well above $10 million, but repeated reductions followed. Potential buyers faced the same problem. Purchasing the house was only the beginning of its cost. After remaining available for years, the estate sold in 2019 for approximately $2,900,000, an enormous reduction from earlier expectations, and far below the amount reportedly invested in purchase and renovations. The mansion was not cursed by ghosts. It was cursed by scale. Every extra room increased the financial burden, and highly personalized features made the property difficult to sell. What looked perfect for displaying success became a giant machine that constantly consumed money, forcing 50 Cent to accept a dramatic loss simply to leave it behind. Number 31. Mike Tyson. The Ohio Mansion. Hidden in the Ohio countryside stood a mansion built for the wildest period of Mike Tyson's fame. The estate reportedly included massive living areas, elaborate metalwork, entertainment spaces, and outdoor enclosures associated with the boxer's exotic animals. Tyson's life changed through legal trouble, imprisonment, divorce, and financial collapse. The mansion was left behind, and years of vacancy transformed luxury into decay. Photographs taken during its abandoned period showed damaged interiors, empty pools, broken surfaces, and rooms stripped of their former glamour. Graffiti appeared on walls that had once represented heavyweight champion wealth. Nature slowly reclaimed areas around the structure. The property became an internet fascination because it looked like a movie set designed to show the fall of a king. Visitors compared old photographs of Tyson's lifestyle with images of silent hallways and neglected grounds. Eventually, the building found a dramatically different purpose. A religious organization acquired and renovated it for use as a church. Spaces once associated with celebrity parties and excess were converted into areas for worship and community gatherings. The transformation prevented total destruction, but Tyson's version of the mansion disappeared. His departure marked the moment when the estate stopped being a home and became a monument to how rapidly fame can reverse direction. Number 32. Evander Holyfield. The 109-room estate. Everything about this Georgia mansion was designed on a championship scale. Evander Holyfield's estate reportedly contained more than 100 rooms, a bowling alley, swimming facilities, a theater, extensive dining and entertainment areas, and enough land to create a private world. The operating costs were equally enormous. Reports suggested that electricity alone could reach astonishing monthly totals. Maintenance required continuous staffing, repairs, landscaping, security, and management. Holyfield earned hundreds of millions of dollars during his boxing career, but divorces, business problems, child support responsibilities, and financial decisions gradually weakened his position. The mansion became connected to major debt and foreclosure proceedings. A bank eventually obtained the property through an auction. Rapper Rick Ross later purchased it, turning the former boxer's dream estate into one of hip-hop's most recognizable homes. For Holyfield, losing the mansion represented more than selling unnecessary real estate. The property had been built around his identity as a victorious heavyweight who had overcome poverty and doubt. Its size communicated that he had finally reached a level nobody could take away. Financial reality proved otherwise. The larger the mansion became, the more difficult it was to support when income and circumstances changed. Holyfield later expressed a desire to recover it, showing that the emotional connection never completely disappeared. Number 33. Whitney Houston, the Mendham Mansion. Curved architecture, a recording studio, a swimming pool, and highly personal design made Whitney Houston's New Jersey mansion instantly recognizable. It was closely connected to the height of her career and was featured during major moments in her public and private life. The property also became associated with the difficult later years of her marriage to Bobby Brown. As Houston's financial and personal problems intensified, reports emerged about unpaid obligations and possible foreclosure proceedings. Holding on to the mansion became increasingly difficult. The home carried a large mortgage, while other debts, legal expenses, declining record sales, and professional instability placed pressure on her finances. An Atlanta property was reportedly repossessed, while the New Jersey estate faced its own complications. The Mendham Mansion was eventually sold, ending Houston's connection to one of the most visible symbols of her success. Later owners renovated or marketed the property, but public memory continued linking it with the singer. This house was not abandoned in one dramatic night. The separation happened gradually as a superstar's world became smaller. Rooms designed during a period of confidence remained behind, while Houston moved through hotels, rentals, rehabilitation attempts, and temporary living arrangements. That slow departure gave the mansion its haunting quality. It stood as evidence of the distance between the woman who had once commanded the music industry and the increasingly vulnerable person struggling to maintain control of her health, career, relationships, and finances. Number 34. Burt Reynolds, Valhalla. During his most successful years, Burt Reynolds lived with the confidence of a man who believed the money would continue forever. His Florida estate, known as Valhalla, included waterfront views, large entertainment spaces, guest accommodations, and the relaxed atmosphere of a private celebrity resort. Reynolds also accumulated other properties, businesses, vehicles, horses, and expensive commitments. When his career slowed and his divorce from Lonnie Anderson created major financial pressure, the lifestyle became impossible to support. Bankruptcy followed in the 1990s. Valhalla later became connected to foreclosure proceedings and unpaid mortgage claims. Reynolds eventually lost ownership, although a friend reportedly purchased the property and allowed him to remain there as a tenant for a period. That arrangement produced a painful reversal. The actor was physically inside the familiar house, but it no longer belonged to him. He had moved from Hollywood's highest-paid ranks to depending on someone else's kindness to stay in a place he once controlled. Reynolds often used humor when discussing his financial collapse, but the mansion revealed the seriousness beneath the jokes. Every room represented a level of spending created during years when his earning power seemed unlimited. Number 35. Toni Braxton, the Beverly Hills Short Sale. Appearances created a confusing picture at this Beverly Hills mansion. Toni Braxton remained a famous recording artist with hit songs, television appearances, tours, and a luxurious public image. Behind that success were serious financial pressures and repeated bankruptcy proceedings. The singer purchased a multi-million-dollar home during a strong earning period. However, health problems affected her ability to perform, while contracts, debts, taxes, business expenses, and mortgage obligations continued. The property eventually appeared on the market as a short sale, meaning the expected selling price would not fully cover the amount connected to the mortgage. For a performer associated with elegance and wealth, the situation publicly revealed how complicated celebrity finances can become. Braxton had already experienced bankruptcy once before. A second filing showed that returning to commercial success did not automatically repair every earlier obligation. Expensive homes became especially dangerous because their monthly costs continued regardless of touring schedules or album performance. Leaving the mansion was therefore part of a larger financial reset. The property looked like proof that Braxton had recovered, but it also placed another heavy commitment on an unstable foundation. Her story is not simply about reckless shopping. Medical issues, entertainment contracts, supporting a professional team, and changes within the music industry all contributed to the pressure. The mansion's curse was its ability to hide danger behind beauty. From the street, it represented success. On financial documents, it represented another asset that could no longer be sustained. Number 36. Ed McMahon, the Mulholland Drive Mansion. For decades, Ed McMahon represented the cheerful voice of American television success. His famous introductions, commercials, game shows, and sweepstakes advertisements made him appear permanently secure. That image collapsed when his mansion near Mulholland Drive entered foreclosure proceedings. The Mediterranean-style residence sat inside a gated community associated with some of Los Angeles's wealthiest entertainers. McMahon explained that a serious neck injury had prevented him from working normally. At the same time, the housing market weakened, the property remained difficult to sell, and missed mortgage payments accumulated. The irony was impossible to ignore. A man widely recognized for presenting giant prize checks was publicly struggling to keep his own home. News crews gathered outside as lenders, buyers, and possible rescue offers became part of the story. Several potential solutions were discussed, including proposed purchases that might have allowed McMahon to remain as a tenant. The situation demonstrated how foreclosure can reduce ownership to a race between deadlines, negotiations, and public embarrassment. The mansion had once offered privacy after a life spent before cameras. Financial trouble turned it into the center of another unwanted television event. McMahon eventually left the property behind as declining health and debt changed his final years. The house's gates could keep curious strangers away, but they could not stop interest, medical costs, or a real estate downturn from entering the family's life. Number 37. Jose Canseco, the Encino Mansion. During baseball's high-paying years, Jose Canseco lived like one of the sport's most powerful celebrities. His large Encino mansion included the space and luxury expected from an athlete who had earned major contracts and become a household name. Then income, legal problems, divorces, business decisions, and the changing real estate market altered the calculation. Canseco stopped making payments and allowed the house to enter foreclosure. Unlike celebrities who attempted to hide their situation, he publicly acknowledged what had happened. Canseco argued that continuing to pay for a property worth less than the debt attached to it did not make financial sense. The decision was practical, but it also represented a major fall from his peak image. A former sports superstar, who had once seemed larger than life, was now discussing negative equity and surrendering a house to the bank. Foreclosure carries a different emotional weight from an ordinary sale. The owner does not leave after receiving an attractive offer. The property is taken through a legal and financial process because the original agreement can no longer be maintained. Canseco's mansion became one of the first widely discussed celebrity examples during the American housing crisis. His fame made the situation unusual, but the basic problem was shared by thousands of ordinary homeowners. The mortgage remained enormous, while the house's value moved in the opposite direction. Number 38. Allen Iverson, the Atlanta Mansion. Style, speed, and fearless confidence made Allen Iverson one of basketball's most influential stars. His Atlanta mansion reflected that success, with expansive rooms, elaborate finishes, recreational areas, and the privacy expected by an athlete constantly surrounded by attention. After his playing income declined, reports about debts, legal disputes, expensive personal commitments, and financial instability became increasingly common. The mansion entered foreclosure and was sold at auction. The sale price reportedly failed to cover the full amount owed, leaving the property as another symbol of how quickly professional sports wealth can become complicated. Athletes may earn extraordinary sums, but their highest income period can last only a few years. Mansions, taxes, maintenance, staff, and family responsibilities continue long afterward. Iverson's cultural importance did not protect the house. Awards, endorsement deals, sold-out arenas, and career earnings had no influence once mortgage payments were missed and the foreclosure timeline began. The residence was not an abandoned ruin in the traditional sense. Its curse was legal transfer. One day it represented Iverson's private world. After the auction, it belonged to someone else regardless of the memories inside. His story also challenged the public assumption that career earnings equal available cash. Taxes, agents, relatives, investments, divorces, and spending can reduce enormous totals rapidly. Number 39. Scott Storch, the Miami Palace. Music producer Scott Storch created hits for some of the biggest artists in the world. His earnings funded private jets, luxury cars, jewelry, parties, and an enormous waterfront mansion on Miami Beach's exclusive Palm Island. The property contained nearly 20,000 square feet of living space, multiple bedrooms, a theater, waterfront access, grand staircases, and rooms designed for constant entertainment. It looked like the headquarters of someone whose career could never slow down. Substance misuse and extreme spending changed everything. Storch later acknowledged burning through a fortune during a short period, when work became less important than the lifestyle surrounding it. Mortgage problems pushed the mansion into foreclosure. The house was taken and later sold to another owner before eventually becoming associated with rapper Birdman. For Storch, losing the property marked the visible end of an era. Music royalties and production fees had once arrived quickly enough to support almost any expense. When creative output declined, the mansion continued demanding payments. Its beauty made the financial danger easy to ignore. Guests saw water views, polished stone, chandeliers, and expensive furniture. Lenders saw missed obligations secured by a valuable asset. Number 40. Weirdman. The mansion with two financial collapses. One celebrity's foreclosure became another celebrity's opportunity when Birdman acquired the Miami Beach mansion previously connected to Scott Storch. The Cash Money Records co-founder purchased the waterfront estate and redesigned sections around his own extravagant style. For a time, the house again became a symbol of music industry power. Its enormous interior included guest suites, a theater, chef's kitchen, multiple wine storage areas, waterfront facilities, and expansive entertainment rooms. Then the property encountered another cycle of trouble. Hurricane damage reportedly affected the residents, while lawsuits and loan disputes surrounded Birdman's finances. A lender pursued foreclosure, claiming millions remained unpaid. Birdman attempted to sell the mansion at changing prices. The same features that made it impressive also limited the number of potential buyers. Very few people wanted, or could responsibly maintain, such a personalized 20,000-square-foot palace. The building had now watched two music figures experience serious financial reversals. That repeated pattern helped create the appearance of a curse, although the explanation was more practical than paranormal. Enormous luxury homes require stable cash flow, especially when located near saltwater and hurricanes. Insurance, repairs, security, climate control, taxes, and loan interest can become overwhelming. Birdman eventually surrendered control of the property through legal and financial arrangements. The mansion remained on Palm Island, waiting for another chapter, while its second famous resident learned the same lesson as the first. Acquiring a trophy is not the same as being able to carry its weight forever. Number 41. R. Kelly, the Chocolate Factory Mansion. Behind high walls in suburban Chicago stood a mansion widely nicknamed the Chocolate Factory. R. Kelly filled the roughly 20,000-square-foot property with unusual entertainment features, including an indoor swimming area, artificial rock formations, a waterfall, a hot tub, and spaces designed to resemble a private resort. The residence became connected to the singer's recording career and increasingly controversial personal life. As lawsuits, investigations, declining income, and serious allegations accumulated, mortgage payments reportedly stopped. Foreclosure proceedings began after the lender claimed payments had been missed for an extended period. Kelly attempted to sell the mansion, but the asking price fell, and no successful private sale prevented the auction. The lender ultimately acquired the property for far less than the amount once associated with it. Later owners renovated and returned it to the market, but its history remained impossible to remove from public discussion. The mansion's nickname had originally suggested creativity and fantasy. Over time, it developed a far more uncomfortable meaning because of the criminal conduct for which Kelly was later convicted and the allegations surrounding his private environments. For legal and ethical reasons, it is important not to treat the property itself as responsible for human behavior. Buildings do not create crimes, yet certain addresses become permanently connected to the actions of the people who controlled them. Kelly's loss of the mansion came before the final collapse of his freedom and career, making the foreclosure an early physical sign that his private empire was beginning to fall apart. Number 42. Nellie, the unfinished Missouri mansion. From a distance, this Wildwood, Missouri, property looked like a castle hidden outside St. Louis. Nellie purchased the partially completed mansion in the early 2000s, reportedly intending to renovate it and possibly create a home for members of his family. The work never reached completion. Years passed while the residence remained largely empty. Exposure, trespassing, unfinished surfaces, missing materials, and lack of regular maintenance gradually damaged the structure. Photographs showed a strange mixture of ambition and neglect. The mansion had a dramatic entrance, large windows, multiple levels, a swimming pool, and enough space to become an impressive estate. Inside, bare flooring, incomplete rooms, debris, and deterioration made it appear abandoned. Because Nelly strongly identified with St. Louis in his music, Fans wondered why such a visible local property had been left untouched. Various personal explanations circulated, but many were never clearly confirmed. The house eventually appeared on the market for just under $600,000, an unusually low figure for a mansion of its size. A buyer acquired it after significant interest, though the structure still required major investment. Unlike a completed celebrity home lost through foreclosure, this mansion became cursed by delay. Every year without construction made finishing it more expensive. Every broken surface created another repair. The original vision faded until selling the unfinished problem became more realistic than completing the dream. Nellie escaped the burden, but the new owner inherited decades of unanswered potential. Number 43. Liza Minnelli, the Beverly Hills Childhood Mansion. Old Hollywood history filled every room of this Beverly Hills residence. Director Vincente Minnelli lived there, and his daughter Liza spent part of her childhood inside the house after his marriage to Judy Garland ended. When Vincente died, ownership passed to Liza, but his widow, Lee Minnelli, retained the right to live there. That arrangement later produced a painful legal conflict. Liza attempted to sell the property and offered alternative housing for her elderly stepmother. Lee refused to leave and filed a lawsuit accusing Liza of violating her rights. Public reports described disputes involving staff, household expenses, maintenance, and the future of the mansion. An agreement eventually allowed Lee to remain after the property changed hands. Following her death, the once glamorous residence reportedly stood neglected, attracting urban explorers and photographers interested in abandoned celebrity homes. Images showed damaged interiors, empty rooms, overgrown landscaping, and traces of the elegant life that had once existed there. The decay felt especially dramatic, because the property was connected to three major figures from Hollywood history: Vincente Minnelli, Judy Garland, and Liza Minnelli. Nobody in the story received a clean ending. Liza inherited an asset she could not freely control. Lee fought to remain in a home she believed had been promised to her. Buyers acquired a property tied to continuing obligations. The mansion became cursed by family instructions, grief, aging, and legal language written years before the conflict began. Number 44. Steve Jobs, the mansion he wanted destroyed. Admiration for good design did not extend to every historic building Steve Jobs owned. In 1984, he purchased the Jackling House, a massive Spanish colonial revival mansion in Woodside, California. The residence contained dozens of rooms, elaborate fixtures, balconies, marble features, and a large pipe organ. Despite its architectural history, Jobs eventually decided that the house was too large, outdated, and poorly suited to his family. After moving elsewhere, he sought permission to demolish it and replace it with a smaller modern residence. Preservation groups fought the plan, arguing that the mansion had cultural and architectural importance. Years of court cases followed. While lawyers debated its future, the empty building deteriorated. Paint peeled, plaster weakened, vegetation entered parts of the interior, and the structure became known locally as the house Steve Jobs hated. Jobs argued that restoring it would be unreasonably expensive and that no practical alternative had been found. Preservationists searched for someone willing to relocate or rehabilitate the building, but proposed solutions failed. Demolition was finally allowed in 2011. Salvagers removed significant fixtures before machinery brought down the remaining structure. Jobs died months later, before completing the new home he had imagined for the site. The Jackling House was not taken from him by a bank or fire. Instead, Jobs abandoned it emotionally and spent years fighting for the right to erase it. The mansion's curse was becoming an object its owner valued only as an obstacle. Number 45. MC Hammer, the Fremont Dream Mansion. At the height of his fame, MC Hammer built a mansion designed to prove that his success had no limits. The approximately 17,000 square foot Fremont estate stood on several acres overlooking the surrounding landscape. Its features reportedly included marble floors, enormous entertainment spaces, custom designs, swimming facilities, recording areas, and enough room for the rapper's large family, employees, dancers, and guests. Hammer supported an unusually large professional circle, spending money at a rate few music careers could sustain. Album sales eventually slowed, while salaries, lawsuits, taxes, vehicles, travel, and property expenses continued. In 1996, Hammer filed for bankruptcy, with debts exceeding his available assets. The mansion had to be sold. Reports placed the sale price at approximately $5,300,000, far below what had been spent creating and maintaining the estate. Hammer relocated to a far more modest house. The story became one of entertainment's most famous financial warnings. His earnings had been real, but so were the expenses. Building a palace during the strongest years of a career assumed that future income would remain equally strong. Nothing supernatural haunted the Fremont mansion. The curse was the belief that a peak could last forever. Once the gates closed behind Hammer, the property continued under new ownership while his name became permanently connected to celebrity bankruptcy. The mansion was supposed to prove that he had escaped financial insecurity. Instead, abandoning it became the clearest public evidence that insecurity had returned. Behind every gate was a promise of safety, privacy, and permanent success. But fire, debt, tragedy, fear, and legal trouble turned these dream homes into places their famous owners could no longer keep. Which mansion had the most shocking story? Share your answer below, and subscribe for more hidden stories from Hollywood's